Ladies and gentlemen, can you hear me well? Good morning to this panel devoted to explaining different case studies of projects on solidarity. My name is Constanze Itzel. I have the huge responsibility to be director of the House of European History in Brussels, that some of you might know. When I saw the map outside of this room where we are asked where we come from, I didn't know what to put, because we could put the origins of my family from Prague or from Silesia. We could put where I was raised in Bavaria, or my current hometown, which is Brussels. This is just to frame this panel, because some of my panelists also share this diverse origin in their biography, and we will also try to have a European and transnational approach in this panel. This morning we've heard a lot about the political use of memory, that can be used not only to reconcile but also to divide and to make nationalistic or imperialistic claims. And now I would say that we, on this background of describing this political use of memory, we are moving now to the civil society movements and to different, to panelists from different disciplines who are trying to build solidarity by different means. And this panel has several challenges. The most practical of which I would say that those of you who don't have Spanish biorhythm might get hungry during the time of this panel. I hope that you will stick with us until 1:30. The more practical challenge in the moderation is that we have 5 panelists and from very diverse backgrounds and from very diverse disciplines. So very typical for a European panel, for a European topic. In order to bridge a little bit the diversity that we are dealing with, I've thought about how to make it, how to create some links between the topics we are going to speak about. And first, I'd like to mention once more, the theme of the panel, solidarity. Yesterday and this morning, we've heard many different definitions of this word. A solidarity with a big S and a small s, we were told this morning, solidarity as a foundation, the foundation that hosts us here, and thank you very much for this. Solidarity as a very important historical movement, and many different meanings of the word in different languages that are represented here in the room. But one thing that I would like to pick up on from yesterday is the definition of Rafal Rogulski, who told us that etymologically speaking, sorry, false friend, the word can come from bond, can mean a bond. And so, first of all, I would like to thank the 2 networks that host us here, because bringing these 2 networks, EUROM and ENRS, together here does already mean weaving new bonds. And I will try to do my best also to try and weave some bonds between the panelists here, because they are really diverse in origin, and hopefully also between the panelists and the audience. So in terms of how we will proceed, it's a bit like the panel this morning, 5-minute presentations by all the projects that are represented here. Then I have some follow-up questions, and then we will open the discussion with the audience. And for the order of appearance, I think this morning it was alphabetical. This time I will ask you to imagine a map of Europe, and we will move from east to west. Although, as I said, most projects have a very transnational and European way of looking at things, and also cross-border ways of representing solidarity. So we will embark on a journey from Ukraine with Bogdana, who you see in the middle. I will introduce the panelists later a bit more specifically, to Poland, Ukraine with Maciej, then up to Finland with Erki, to Spain with some Romanian origins with Luisa, and Luisa will speak in Spanish, so have your headphones ready if you need them, and finally to Strasbourg with a very pan-European outlook with Finn. And all projects we will discover have a cross-border, transnational, or even pan-European perspective, and so I hope that we can complement the paradigms of this morning's panel, because this morning's panel, I don't know if you realized, they were very much made up of the case of Spain, and in the case of Romania, and in the case of Hungary, etc., which is normal because history is perceived like this. But today, here, we will try to to look a bit more into the cross-border interactions and transnational links of creating solidarity and cooperation. This order of appearance also means that we will move through different academic disciplines or different ways and means of creating solidarity. We will start with projects based on literature and literature translation. Then we will discover the important work historians are doing for reconciliation. And finally, also humanitarian aid and education and history teaching and some other means like exhibitions. So I would like to embark you now on this journey through different disciplines, different ways. And the two questions I will put to the panelists are very simple: the what and the how. What are you doing? What does solidarity mean for you? And how, by which means do you think can solidarity be built? And how can we learn from you? What works, what doesn't work? So how do your projects foster cooperation, solidarity, mutual understanding, and also hopefully reconciliation? So I will start with Bogdana. Bogdana, who is in the center of the table. Bogdana Brilanska is a cultural manager, and she has worked for Lviv City Council's creative programs after graduating in 2009 with an MA from the Ivan Franko National University of Lviv. She co-authored this city's application for the title of UNESCO City of Literature, as well as the city's cultural strategy up until 2025. And obviously, she operates in a very tense context now, in a very difficult context that we are curious to hear about, where solidarity suddenly takes on a very different and very serious meaning. So Bogdana, I would like to ask you to introduce your projects for 5 minutes, please.
I just wanted to ask first, is there possible to show the PDF that I sent or no? I'm to be prepared. I will start just to say, for people who don't know what is the UNESCO City of Literature title, it's a title that connects cities to the network of the cities of literature. Now we have almost 42 cities all over the world, and I want to start with that to explain that from the beginning we started to work in the meaning of the network in general. We, the City of Literatures, are the network that is working with the literature, with the freedom of speech, and also with the translation. For the Cities of Literature, when the war started in Ukraine, it was a bit also difficult to talk about this, because to our network there are there is Lviv in this network. At the same year, there was a city from Russia, Ulyanovsk, who got the title also, the City of Literature. But when the war started, there was a lot of communication. How do we communicate, and what do we do in the network, and how we explain and how we show the solidarity in this network? In general, it's very hard to work in culture now in Ukraine, as you can imagine. You are not only doing the culture projects, you need to think what these culture projects are talking about the war in Ukraine, and what they are talking about the Ukrainian history in the meaning of what is happening now. And every journey that I am taking from the beginning of the war is a journey from home to somewhere where I am not safe, in the meaning of the language, in the meaning of the stories that I should tell, and the meaning of the reaction that I will get from these stories. Last year, when our office started to work on the projects and started to speak about what is happening in Ukraine, it was hard for us to find the language and the stories that we need to tell. And we started, the first thing that we did the video with English explanation of the history of the literature of Ukrainian literature in Ukraine. How we lost a lot of poets during the whole time that we were colonized by the Russian Imperium, and how we lost our language a few times, and how we are regaining it for the last 30 years that we are independent state. And we were talking about the people about their remembrance, about the famous Ukrainian poets, for us famous, maybe you will not know these names, but it was about Taras Shevchenko, he is the most famous one, it was about Lesa Ukrainka, and it was about Vasil Stus. All these three poets were living in the times when there was no Ukraine in the meaning of the independent state. But they were Ukrainians and they were speaking Ukrainian language and they were writing about the Ukraine as an independent state. And Taras Shevchenko, he was bought out from kripatstvo. It's the form of the slavery that was in the Ukrainian territory inled by the Russian Imperium. Lesa Ukrainka, she was the woman and she was the Ukrainian author at the same time, and she was the beginner of the feministic movement in Ukraine. And Vasil Stus, he was a Ukrainian poet at the beginning of the 60s in Ukraine when there was a totalitarian regime in Ukraine made by the USSR, but you need to understand that at that time you cannot speak Ukrainian and be published in Ukrainian. You could be only published in Russian language. So for us now it's very important, so we will tell about these stories. And in the end, Vasil Stus died in prison because he was fighting in the meaning as he was a dissident and he was publishing poems that were not very convenient for that government at that time. Why I'm speaking about him? Because the project that I will be talking about started with a quote from his poem, and this quote is very popular in Ukraine because one of the soldiers that was fighting at the front line, he read it on the video while he was bombed. What do you do when you are under the shelling? And he was reading the poetry of Vasil Stus about the dignity, about the that you need to stand your ground, to be in this place and to do what you are doing, to protect what you are protecting. And this poetry is about this. And this was the quote that we choose, and we wrote about the idea of the project to our partners in Vilnius, Lithuania, and they recall for us. We decided to do the project connected to the young writers or emerging writers in Ukraine and in Lithuania. The idea was very simple. We did this program before the war, but the theme, as you can understand, changed, and we started to work with how do you go to the freedom? What is your way to the freedom? How do you find your ground in the times when everything is crashing all over Ukraine, and not only in Ukraine, because the idea was to also talk to Lithuanian authors, because Lithuania is also now on the border with this, with all of this, what is happens, and they have their own history about this singing revolution in Lithuania, when the Soviet Union army killed people, and they were trying to take their freedom. So we have this connection, and we found the support from their side in the meaning of money, because as you can imagine, in Ukraine now we don't have a lot of money for culture, because we need to still stand our ground in this war. And we started to collect the novels, short novels from all over Ukraine and from all over Lithuania about this time. About your experience, how to find the freedom. And it was very interesting for us. We got the novels from all over Ukraine, like from the cities that were under the shelling at that moment, and also from the people who moved because of the war, who were now not in Ukraine because the war started. And this very strange, like the story that was built from this one point, like from the point of war and from the point of going from the war to another country, it showed us a very similar and understandable position of hurt, that these people, all of us, the Ukrainians now, are the people who are hurting from what is happening in very different ways. And I want to recall the question that was on the previous panel about this Syrian who are also running. And when I am talking about this war, and when we are talking about this war, we need to understand that it's not conflict between Ukrainians and Russians. It's another aggression against the people that are done by the Russian country. And this, what we need to understand. The Georgian people, the Lithuanian people, we are we are in the solidarity because of this hurt, because of this pain that was done to us. When we presented this project to our colleagues in the Cities of Literature in Australia, they decided to do the translation into English, because we did the translation from Lithuanian to Ukrainian, from Ukrainian to Lithuanian. All the texts are translated. And now they will be also published in English. And I think that we will do this year also another project, but with the poetry, because we work with the literature as a method of remembrance and the method of gathering all this expression. Because I know history is very important, but as a person who works with literature, I should say that sometimes the novel which was written, or the poetry which was written at the moment of the tragedy, it says you more than all the stories you can hear from that moment.
Excuse me, Bogdana?
Yes, I'm finishing. So thank you, and that was like very brief presentation. The last, I think, it's not very good visible, but this is our first page. And this red line that you see, we decided to show it like the red line that you cannot cross or cannot stand back, because you need to stand your ground to find your freedom. So that's all. Thank you.
Thank you, Bogdana, and sorry for being so brutal with the time. It's just in the interest of the following speakers. We will stay in the field of literature and translation, because also Maciej Piotrowski has told us in the preparatory meeting that for him the reading of each other's literature is a key factor. So Maciej is a historian and studies scholar and animator of cultural life in the Polish-Ukrainian borderland. He has worked on the exhibition of the Holodomor Museum in Kiev, and he translates Ukrainian literature such as the novel, now you help me to pronounce the Ukrainian name, I will say it in English, The Yellow Prince. And he has collaborated with the Creators Foundation, the College of Eastern Europe, and the Folkovskio Association. So, Maciej, can you confirm what was said before, that contemporary literature is a means of expression of hurt or of what contemporaries live through? And yeah, please speak about your work of translating it into different languages. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Truly I am working with literature, but also with exhibition in Nizio Design International, exhibition, museums, literary, cultural projects, all it's about narration, about something which has to be tell to people and translate to another people, to another culture. However, maybe I will start with my personal story, because it's something about searching of solidarity, of mutual understanding. Because I myself, I was born on Polish-Ukrainian borderland, on Zamojszczyzna region in Poland, and it was something in 20th century which was called by Timothy Snyder as a bloodlands, places of genocides, of ethnic cleansing. But for me, in my young years, it was just my homeland, the place where I was rising, doing some first projects. But once I've went by bus across the border to Lviv, the beautiful city where Bogdana is working, and I discovered this vivid place, real city with modern cultural life, not just historical buildings, cemeteries, but real modern life. And I start to cooperate with artists, with musicians from Lviv, and started to bringing them to Poland. and different events, festivals, and starting to connecting to groups. And we established, while I was studying on Lviv University, established with brothers and friends association of borderland culture, and starting to animate this life on borderland. Maybe what is important here that that was funded in the village which was wiped out by Polish-Ukrainian conflict. However, we want to make this place, Gorajec, a little village in Poland, recreate from the symbol of tragic past of Polish-Ukrainian history to a site of reconciliation of our nations by doing creative work. Maybe I will jump in time a little bit and talk also about the hugest challenge of mine, because after these creative cultural projects, I moved to Warsaw and start cooperation with Nizio Design International and Holodomor Museum in Kyiv, which is building now. I'm working 4 years on this project, and I think it's really important, not only because of that it is very huge and important from artistical and architectural point of view, and because of that it will be the first this scale modern museum on Ukraine, but also because of this my personal story, because of that historical burdens of Polish-Ukrainian history. And by this project we can show that Polish and Ukrainians can do together very huge, great historical project. And maybe I will not focus on this, because tomorrow we will be had chance to listen the leader of the project, Mirosław Nisio, and he will talk more about this great initiative. But I will just say about my role as a historian, because I am in this project a bridge between the team of curators from Kyiv and team of designers from Poland in this national, transnational, international consortium. And I'm trying to help them to understand each other, translating not only the words, but also some context, some historical background, and trying to also not to impose some solutions from Poland to Ukraine, but trying to debate, to discuss about it. But yes, maybe more about it later. So in connection also to tell about literature, as it was said, I am a translator of literature, a book about Holodomor, Vasyl Barka, Yellow Prince. First, after 60 years after publishing it, it is published in Poland now. And what is maybe important here, I also tried to animate this environment of translators in Central Europe and try to make some platform of cooperation of translators. We create with friends in 2018 a project called Rozstaje, Crossroads, and is gathering people from Latvia to Serbia, from Poland to Ukraine. And it wasn't just another grant project, just not another seminar, but this platform when we making friends, making strong relations with each other, trying to communicate, help, promote each other, but maybe also later about this strengthening the professional communication and standards. However, in this our world of cultural animators, translators, exhibition and museology world, this word was changed by February 24, open Russian aggression against Ukraine, against our neighbor, and it turned most of this project upside down. But I think due to these networks which was created, we maintain some balance. And for example, in Nizio Design, we were trying by our NGOs, Nizio Foundation, we are trying to firstly support Ukrainian migrants coming to Warsaw and making a project for young artists who became architectural artists who can be designers of such project as Holodomor Museum in future. And also we maintain contact with Holodomor Museum team and trying to work together to make our project implementable in the future, because of course now due to war it is really hard to work on such a team, but it is very crucial for our nations. Also in other my activities, like in this translators group Rozstaje, we established a scholarship for Ukrainian best reporters, and due to by our networks in media, in translators, we were translating their reports from Ukraine and publishing it in the best media of Central Europe in, I suppose now, 7 or 8 languages, and giving the floor to the Ukrainians. They can speak in their voices, translated by translators from Central Europe. So from all these projects to tell about solidarity, I can say that for solidarity you need mutual understanding. And translator and cultural animation is, I think, important in this project, in this process, because we can help people to communicate, to understand these narratives, which is produced by culture, and translate it to another word of another culture. Thank you.
Thank you so much, Maciej. You said that for solidarity we need to understand each other, and translation for you is a means, translation of narratives. Now, if we stay in this image, we will now look at the case of how historical narratives can be confronted with each other and brought into contact with each other, and how better understanding of each other's historical narrative can lead to mutual understanding. And that is what Erkki Tuojo Moya is working on, and because he is the founding chairman of Historians Without Borders in Finland. He has been working on that since 2015, and he has a PhD in social sciences, a master in economics and business administration, and he's teaching political history at the University of Helsinki. And he has also a very impressive political career behind him. So Erkki, could you speak a little bit about how history, how reconciling or historical narratives works, and also probably the current challenges that you face in the current situation? Thank you.
Thank you. Coming from Finland, I think that we do have some knowledge and experience of both resistance and solidarity. And today, of course, there are lots of references to our experiences during the Winter War 1939. And we are this is fine with us as long as people do not refer to the continuation in 1941 when we joined the Nazi attack against the Soviet Union. But I would also like to remind you of 1918, because 1918 we had a bloody civil war in Finland with tens of thousands of people killed. But luckily, at the end of the war, we avoided both a fascist and a communist dictatorship. But the civil war left a very bitter legacy in the country, and it was only really overcome, of course, by our joining together against the aggressor in 1939, but actually it took about 100 years before we could share the memories of this civil war with all the parties acting together and their descendants doing this together. And this brings me to the role of memory in history, because as historians who write history and use historical sources know, memory is always the most unreliable part of the sources you use. It is subjective, and it is also very selective. But it is necessary to use them. But I think we should work to get memories into shared memories of also of the most difficult parts of our history. And this is what Historians Without Borders is about. It was based on the countless occasions that I, both as foreign minister in my country and as a historian, had encountered how history kept being used and misused, abused, to foster conflicts and prevent conflict resolution in various parts of the world. And even very ancient history, think about 1385 Kosovo-Polia in the Balkans, is still very much alive and being used to prevent reconciliation and conflict prevention. So we asked ourselves, what could and should historians do to prevent this kind of misuse of history? Because mostly it is not historians themselves. There are exceptions, unfortunately, but it is mostly the media and politicians who primarily misuse and abuse history for their own ends. And we wanted to bring historians across borders together to counter this misuse and abuse of history. So we founded the Historians Without Borders as a Finnish NGO in 2015, but it also acts as the secretariat for the International Network of Historians Without Borders, which we established at the end of our international conference on the use and abuse of history in 2016. Yes, and according to the declaration which was adopted at the conference, our aim is to deepen general and comprehensive knowledge and understanding of history, promote open and free access to historical materials and archives, encourage interactive dialogue between different views and interpretations of history to assist in the process of mutual understanding, and support efforts to identify the abuse of history in fostering and sustaining conflicts, help defuse conflicts and contribute to conflict resolution processes, and to promote the teaching of history in the spirit of this declaration, and in also incorporating an understanding of the role of women and gender perspectives in efforts to build peace and resolve conflicts. So we are not primarily seeking to take sides in any conflicts about different interpretations of history. Rather, we have seen our role as a facilitator, bringing together opposing parties in conflicts concerning history with the aim of removing this use in conflicts. So it's more than resistance, it's about reconciliation whenever possible. And thus, at our 2016 conference in Helsinki, we had workshops bringing together historians from inter alia, Israel and Palestine, Turkey and Armenia, Finland and Russia, and historians from former colonies and colonial powers. And we have also sought to spread knowledge and of and interest in truth and reconciliation commissions, of which there are both good and less good examples from different parts of the world. And concretely, we have been able to promote the establishment of a Truth and Reconciliation Commission based on an agreement between the government of Finland and the Sami Parliament on the history and treatment of the indigenous Sami people in Finland. Other items we have addressed is the role of Belarus in Europe at a seminar between Nordic and Belarusian historians in 2020, when it was still possible to confer with independent Belarusian colleagues. We have also arranged 2 meetings of historians from Ukraine and Russia in Finland. But this was before the war, obviously, and obviously as long as the war continues, this kind of dialogue is impossible, but historians from both sides have indicated their interest in continuing this dialogue when it again becomes possible. With the Russian invasion of Ukraine, the use of history as a justification for war and as part of enemy images and narratives is a European reality, and Putin justifies his actions with symbols and narratives anchored in history, as well as demonizing Ukrainians with strongly loaded accusations. Ukraine and Western countries that support this also make use of historical concepts, images of enemies and symbolism. And on this theme, we arranged a panel discussion in Berlin last December with the participation of Russian historians living today in diaspora because of the conditions in Russia. And thus we are also seeking to bring together Russian historians living in the diaspora today to support their work in preparing for a post-Putin Russia. Putin will not last forever, and with Putin there is no scope for historical dialogue. But we need to also incorporate the work of Russian historians in this, because not all Russian historians are Putinist. And I have had the occasion twice to give a presentation of Historians Without Borders at the Academy of Sciences in Moscow when it was still possible. And I was impressed by the professionalism and independence of Russian historians. But since then, of course, conditions have changed, and many of these people are now living in diaspora. But bringing them together and supporting them to start a process of Vergangenheitsbewältigung, also in Russia, is, I think, a very important contribution for us to show our solidarity in action, because an open and honest dialogue with your former adversaries is a necessity for keeping the peace in the future and removing the use of history in conflicts. Thank you.
Thank you very much also for preventing me to cut you. It's heartbreaking to cut so interesting and complex presentations. But we have two speakers who should also get their scene. So we now move to Luisa Iordache-Castea, who, as I already said, is a little bit a bridge between Romania and Spain, because she has lived in both, and she's currently a lecturer and professor at the Department of Contemporary History at the university, at the National University of Distance Education. She has a PhD in political science, and she told me before the panel that her main research interest is in humanitarian aid, so a very practical and very necessary, especially in current times, form of solidarity. So Luisa, the floor is yours.
Thank you very much, Constance. Thank you very much for this invitation to the organizers and also to our guests, the University of Barcelona, EUROM, and Fundación Solidaridad. Thank you also for this opportunity to present our projects and to share our work. I will switch to Spanish. Voy a empezar esta intervención.
I'm going to start my talk with a sentence by the Ministry of Foreign Affairs, British Minister Edward Grey, August 1914, when he was observing how the lamps in the streets of London were being lit up. Lights are being turned down all over Europe. Maybe we won't see them again in our lives. This sentence summarizes the beginning of a critical period in the history of Europe. As we know, it was a period of total war with an escalate of violence, with the confrontation of concentrationary systems, internment camps, concentration camps, forced labor, killings of civil citizens, and other sequelae which affected the civil population, which was forced to be displaced. Exilium, hunger, deportation, annihilation for political reasons, national, international, and a context of economic crisis and surge of Soviet communism, and also the surge of fascism in different countries of Europe. However, in the darkness of Europe since 1914, some lights were lighted up, the ones of solidarity, of humanitarian aid, humanitarianism, voluntarism, and the culture of peace. And these subjects contribute with two projects by an international team. First of all, the UNICRED project that has ended, and now the Remnant Child project, a project that we just started with an important network of members, and as the previous project, Migrate is centered, among other aspects, in the importance of humanitarian aid and also solidarity, especially during the first half of the 20th century, meaning the first two world wars and the Spanish Civil War. We all know that solidarity is an idea, it's a concept, it's a principle, practice and action, and through the activities of Migrate and other projects, we showed that this solidarity was the alma mater of the fight for the survival and also the combat against the dehumanization caused by wars and weapons. Both conflicts and also the Spanish Civil War erased borders between combatants and non-combatants, between the army and civil population, becoming the scenario of atrocities committed on defenseless and innocent people. In this sense, with our projects and our activities, we showed that the humanitarian aid deployed at that time was the maximum expression of solidarity by taking care of civil population, especially the most vulnerable one, children, women, pregnant women, and the elderly, helping the children, giving aid to the refugees, taking care of the sick, feeding the population, distributing humanitarian and moral help, were humanitarian actions of solidarity in the European countries, actions developed by volunteers and with the help of many organizations, humanitarian organizations, the International Committee of the Red Cross, the Save the Children, Union Internationale de Secours Enfants, British, American committees, etc. Also, with our projects through Remnant Child and Migrate, we proved that this humanitarian task in this humanitarian task, the fundamental role was played by women, forebringers of humanistic values, protectors of childhood, promoters of peace, defending rights and freedoms, and protecting lives. With this, we also want to say that we should not forget that wars were fought also by women with their efforts in the variety of tasks they carry out at different fronts. And unfortunately, getting to know history and its teaching of solidarity has not avoided new humanitarian crises, new waves of refugees, new conflicts, war conflicts, and many other violations of international humanitarian law. Although there is a lot of knowledge and promotion in protection of civil societies, events in different parts of the world nowadays, in Ukraine, but in the recent past, for example, Iraq, Afghanistan, Rwanda, Bosnia, etc., proved that civilians continue to be the objectives and targets and main victims of war violence. And this is why, from Migrate and Remnant Child, we want to make an appeal to the idea that the construction of peace and the consolidation of the culture of peace and also solidarity, it's a permanent task and mutual teaching among generations. Our projects attempt to improve the knowledge about this recent past, to make visible not only the negative aspects of the conflicts, but also to highlight other aspects such as solidarity and humanitarian aid. And we do it through exhibitions, international conferences, workshops, travel seminars, actions, local and national actions with the aim of preserving this past and, above all, to recover the collective, individual experiences of people. Let me conclude my intervention the same way I started, with a quote, but this time from Maria Zambrano, philosopher, a quote that you find in our catalogue of exhibitions. May peace, and peace is not only the absence of war, but it's much more and beyond. It's a lifestyle it's a way of inhabiting the planet. And with these projects, the whole of our team want to contribute with some grain to this noble desire of peace and solidarity for the new generations of today and tomorrow. Thank you.
Thank you, Luisa. By mentioning the teaching of history, you gave me a nice transition to our speaker who is contributing to observing how history is being taught. And as we spoke about state actors and history, the construction of historical narratives and the teaching of them, of course, schools are one of the outlets, if I may say so, of how governments teach history and has been also over the past. So it's very interesting to analyze how history is being taught in different countries, and this is what our last speaker, Finn Morten Heckert, works on, because he's project officer at the Observatory on History Teaching in Europe of the Council of Europe. But he's also working on the HistoLab, a transnational history education and cooperation laboratory, and he completed a master's degree in Southeast European Studies at the University of Graz and the University College London. So I hand over to you, and then we will go to the audience for some questions.
All right, thank you very much for the invitation and for the introduction. Indeed, I'm representing here today mainly the Observatory on History Teaching in Europe, which is an enlarged partial agreement of the Council of Europe. And perhaps to understand the importance of history teaching and our initiative in the context of solidarity and mutual understanding, it is worth to contextualize it very shortly in the Council of Europe and in the activities of the Council of Europe in the field of history teaching. So history teaching has, from the very beginning of the organization after the Second World War, has been recognized as a very important feature and element of building and preserving peace in Europe and to prevent these catastrophes of the Holocaust and Second World War from happening again on the continent. In this way, there was a lot of intergovernmental cooperations focusing on textbook revisions, on recommendations how to teach the European dimension, history teaching, and teaching multiple perspectives in the classrooms to exactly with this goal to promote mutual understanding between the people in Europe. And the Observatory on History Teaching in Europe is quite a new initiative, as it was established in 2020, and it complements the work of the Council of Europe in this field by looking at how history is actually taught in its member states. So we do this via actually several activities. So we have the reporting side of the activities, so we generally, maybe it's better to first contextualize who is actually part of the observatory. So the Council of Europe is the organization with the 46 member states of Europe, and inside this, it's a partial agreement. As I said, I don't know how I can now change the... yeah, there it is, I think. Thank you. So inside the Council of Europe, the observatory is a partial agreement with 16 member states. Here you can see the map and 2 observer states. And so actually what we do is we have the vision in line with what I just said about the Council of Europe, to actually foster mutual understanding and democratic culture through teaching history. And so what we are doing is we do this by the issuing and creating of 2 types of reports. We have the general report on the state of history teaching in Europe, which will be the first one to be released this year, where we look into exactly, for example, what place does history have in the educational system of the member states. Meaning, is it a standalone subject? Is it integrated with other subjects? Then to see how the curricula are written. Are they written by the government alone or in consultation with civil society organizations? What are the preconditions of teachers to fulfill to be allowed to study history, basically? And also to see how actually history is taught in practice. Is the European dimension recognized there as, marginalized groups, the history of marginalized groups? Are they implemented there, and are multiple perspectives integrated in the teaching, or is it rather telling of a national narrative in the history classroom? So besides the regular report, we also have the thematic reports, which is a good chance to look into how the history is taught in regard to a specific topic, more in detail. So the first one was on the teaching of pandemics and natural disasters, and the second one will be, that was issued last year, and the second one, which is expected in 2024, is how social and which economic crises are taught in the history classes. And these reports, what makes them valuable is actually to have a basis to see how history is taught, which can actually, as a factual basis, enable to discuss the ways history is taught with a view to promoting these values of the Council of Europe and then that the member states have subscribed to. So we do this with a variety of methods. So we have we have the information from the governments, of course, from the ministries on how they organize the history teaching. But of course, we cannot solely rely on the state information in those reports. So we cooperate with teacher organizations, and we had a quite huge teachers questionnaire, and we managed to get over 6,000 responses from teachers from the observatory's member states to contrast this information from the governments and to complement it, so that we have a really more coherent and complex picture of the history teaching in the member states. So then besides this, which is the part of the observatory reporting, we have a joint project with the European Commission, which does not only, of course, then apply to the 16 member states who are part of the observatory, but to all the countries of the European Union and all the countries of the Council of Europe members of the Council of Europe. So what we do here, we always say, well, the observatory is looking into how history is actually taught at the present moment. With the joint project, we are looking into how history could be taught in the future. So we had a lot of initiatives in this regard. So we created this digital platform of the HistoLab joint project, where we actually, I don't know if we can click. I linked the portal there in the. Where we actually try to build a database of organizations and experts in the field of history education in Europe and worldwide, because our partners and also the colleague from the SERV National Point reported to me today in a conversation that often we have difficulties that people do not know what actually initiatives and organizations exist in the field of history education. So the aim is to bring them together. If you could click on the HistConnect button, there you could see the, can I do it myself? No. Okay. The HistConnect button there at the very top. There. This one. Exactly. So here you will see a database that you can filter to find project partners and organizations. And of course, this will be also a call for you to register yourself and your organizations and initiatives at the platform in order to help building this database. It is very new. It was released around 2 days ago, so it's growing, and we get new membership applications on everyday basis. And it will also serve as a, can we go back to the presentation? Thank you. As a forum where projects can be presented, call for cooperations, and events can be promoted and shared with the actually wide audience. For example, here you can see, I don't know how I can make the video play, probably here, not at all. Which is embedded, there's a video embedded on the slide. It's perhaps, if you just click on it, it should play. So, on the PowerPoint slide, this is the browser, I believe. You have to go on PowerPoint first. It doesn't work? Well, however, the idea is that we build this database with a calendar of events where the organizations who register can promote their events, enter them. So we have actually like a point where history educators and people from the field can learn about initiatives, events, new publications, and projects that are out there in the field, and to connect with each other. This we complement with. Is the laptop frozen? Okay. Yeah, and besides this, we'll also have a resource hub where we actually bring together the massive amount of resources produced by projects in the field, which are very difficult to navigate, which promote European dimension in history teaching and the multiple perspectives in teaching by by not really incorporating them in the platform, but to provide a tool through which people, educators, can see the areas of interest that they're interested in and find the projects and the resources that exist and be redirected to their pages and to their resources to make them, more navigable on the wide range of the internet. Well. And this is complemented with some other actions like the History Lab Fellowship I presented yesterday, or the European Innovation Days on History Education. And this is what we mainly do in the Observatory and in the Council of Europe in the field of history education. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Finn. I will try now briefly to summarize what I've heard, but in a very broad lines to connect what you've all been saying. And I will add one question from my side that came up, but immediately open the floor to your questions, because then perhaps the speakers can take some of the questions at once. Otherwise, if we have another round, you won't get the floor. So what I picked up from all the highly interesting and very complex statements is that in your view, which seems to be a very optimistic, positive view, solidarity can indeed be created through mutual understanding, through fostering mutual understanding, and vehicles of that understanding, of creating that understanding, are, according to you, to look at each other's narratives, to look at literature, to look at history, memory, to try to understand each other's position through oral history projects, through history teaching, and through exhibitions. And this reminds me of what Timothy Garton Ash once said in an event at the House of European History, when he said that rather than telling always our own stories, we should start to be able to listen to each other, to have empathy, and to start being able to telling each other's stories. So in that case, he mentioned that Germans should be able to tell Greek stories and vice versa, and not always looking at their own position. So this brings me to my question, which is actually to reflect on the impact of what you're doing. I don't know in how far you are doing that. I mean, this is a very difficult question also for us, museum makers. What is the impact of what we are doing? And if we heard this morning that the distortion of history and memory is used politically and can, by that, have an impact on the course of history, can have an impact on the present. How, in turning it the other way around, how can your work have this impact, this positive impact for reconciliation? And when you mentioned in the beginning the singing revolution in the Baltic countries, in a way it's a very encouraging that art can make history move. So the question of the impact of what you are doing, can you measure it? Can you see how it works? Who is your audience? That would be my follow-up question. But I would also like to open the floor now to the audience, so that you can then answer the several questions at once, because otherwise we will not leave the audience enough time. So I would now like to open the floor, and here's the microphone, and please ask your questions. I will see who is first. No question for the moment? Yes, the gentleman over there.
Hello, Edgar Sengezers, I will be the brave one. I wanted to ask Mr. Erkki Tuomioja, as the first responder, but probably someone else also might join. What I was thinking for 2 days sitting in this great audience is that we are speaking about solidarity, and solidarity amongst historians with history, with historical matters. And mostly we are speaking about a form of action, which is solidarity. But besides this form of action, there is values and there are motivations. Mostly we are speaking about solidarity based on European values, democracy, rule of law, etc., 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 which actually are rather new phenomena in European history. And as historians, we are very often dealing with the periods and processes outside of this framework, which makes us a trouble. What I was thinking, looking on these beautiful pictures on the wall, is that aren't we losing connection with history, to historical connection, not only with political sustainability of democracy, which civic education is one of the bases, with cultural Europeanization or Europeanization and sustainability of cultural dimension of our identity, or how we could avoid this split to merge them together.
Well, these are very important and complex questions. First of all, I think that the primary object of solidarity for historians should be solidarity with facts and solidarity with truth, even with unpalatable truths and facts. That is a hard criterion which not all historians meet. But then also I would like to say that Historians Without Borders is not only about Europe. We have had contacts with historians in Africa, in Asia, in North America, and all over the world. And one of our aims has been to find the conditions. We had actually a seminar in Johannesburg, South Africa, where we brought together historians from former colonial powers and former colonies. And this is the kind of thing that we would like to also continue with, because this colonial history has been mostly written by historians from either the colonial powers or the former colonies, with very little interaction between them. So this is the kind of grand vision we have also. But there are other items, and particularly when we are today concerned, why is the rest of the world not joining us in supporting Ukraine as we are doing, and not joining all the sanctions against the aggressor which we have set? I think we also need to look at history and how this history is seen from the other parts of the world, and that there may be also cases of double standards involved. So there are questions why we have not reacted in a similar manner to other occupations, other illegal occupations, and other wars in the world. So I think this is a lesson that we need to look at Europe also from the outside of non-European eyes. We don't have to compromise on our values, that's quite clear, but we have to understand also the narrative and perspective from other parts of the world.
Thank you very much. Jadwiga Rodowicz from Poland. I have my question to Mr. Maciej Piotrowski. I listened to your presentation with deep interest, and I would like to ask you whether you are directing also some of your activities, especially in literature, in translations, vis-à-vis this huge, population of Ukrainian refugees which are now in Poland. Thank you.
Of course. Now we have this situation where Poland, first time in 800 years, are multicultural place. All my life there was only Poles in Poland, almost 95%. Now there is huge population of Ukrainians, and we have to cooperate, deal with it, and I think due to action of all of us, all of this cultural sector of historian, museologist, we have some common grants to cooperate, and everyone of us make a little bit, little piece to this, building this common platform, common grant, and due to this and because of that we share common values, thanks to all the culture, creators of culture, from Wasyl Stus, Wasyl Barka, Polish writers and translators who translate Zbigniew Herbert to Ukrainian, and for example Wasyl Stus to Polish. We have this common understanding which help us to talk with each other, and of course many of books, many of projects as Holodomor Museum, we make some exhibition in Warsaw to show how we create this concept of exhibition. Was all these events was both visited by Polish and Ukrainians in Warsaw. And that is thing that it's helping us to meet in one place due to this work of all people from many generations sharing this and popularization of these European values. Of course, we have neighbors who didn't want to share these values for us. Also, there was translators from Russian. There were people who want to make Russia and Poland also understand each other. They, due to political reasons, due to choice of Russian government and Russian nation, this process with Russia was failed, and Russia now we cannot have any solidarity for war criminals from these places, and that's big problem for us. Cultural workers can do this big work, but of course it isn't enough, and it isn't possible every time. It's not that beautiful work that we will love each other. However, to answer your question and answer a question about impacts of our projects, yes, I think it's possible to work with Ukrainian migrants, like in also programs for young people in Nizhio Foundation. We can work due to this very, very long work of cultural workers. Thank you.
Hello. I'm just shocked, but because yesterday I was just playing chess down there as math student, and I studied math 23 years ago, I guess, and history, science, and journalism in different places. And we are finishing a book. We are 4 of us, and we got the grant in Montevideo, in the Ministry of Science and Education. And it's a book it's just talking about migrations, people migrations, also birds migrations, plants migrations, but human migrations from, I guess, at least 2,000 years ago, somehow. We are 4 of us, and we are drawing, two people drawing, 2 writing, in both sides of in the Atlantic side and this our side. Mediterranean one. So what I'm shocked because we are concerned about everything has been talked, but we were unconnected. So we are publishing on September, about September, and I wonder if there is a way just to even to checking what we wrote, for instance, because we are aware that we have responsibility. We know that, and being here, I'm even more concerned with this subjective truth we are collectively constructing. So I think I'm pleased to be here, because yesterday I was just passing from one yard to the other, and well, just wanted to say that this in order to keep or collect interests of cross-bridging, because we have also, talking about the narrative dimension, we have also open code augmented reality application, which is thought and it's working with neighborhoods, and this is common community, I don't know how to say it, but memory of alive neighborhoods, which include people coming from, we are in Barcelona, I was born here, so diversity of people who are arriving, just bringing stories and bringing different cultures. Okay, it's a huge thing, so it's the third time I say I'm shocked, but pleased to be here.
Thank you very much. That's a very, very pertinent question, the question of how objective can we be and the responsibility of the narrator. Does one of the panelists want to react to this statement? Erki.
If I may, because actually the world has been changed in the fact that historians have been mostly engaged in writing their own national history, and from their own national perspective and from their own population's perspective. But in today's world, in today's Europe, we have countries where 10 to 20% of the population are people who are born in other countries and represent other cultures. So this is a challenge for us as historians to be able to incorporate the different histories and backgrounds and cultures in a common history. But I think this is a positive challenge because it challenges our former way of looking at it from a very narrow nationalistic point of view at your own history and neglecting other points of view. So I welcome this challenge, even if it is in practice a very difficult one.
Hello everybody, I'm Mario, I'm from Porto, Portugal. I'm from the University of Porto, and I would like to thank you for your, I think, interesting interventions, and I would like to make two questions, one statement, two questions, to Erki and to Finn, okay? I'm considering the beginnings, the transformation that occurred in Europe in a period I call in the in-between centuries, between 19th and 20th century. And the value of the literature to the spread of the history. We've got some writers like Stefan Zweig, for instance, Joseph Roth, we've got Ernest Hemingway, and we've got another historian and economical writer that is Karl Polanyi, that they wrote about the history that led to the situation that we achieved in the 1930s decade. Okay, so but they were writers that were read. And they were not historians, but they spread the message. And the question is, like then, 100 years ago, I would say Stefan Zweig wrote their novels, his novels, a novel that is called, a book that is called The World of Yesterday. I think it's very important to understand the passage between the 19th and the 20th century and all that happened there. The question is, who do we have now writing about the present to reach the next generations? We got some movies. We got a movie, for instance, I would say the title in Spanish, El Olvido que Seremos, that is a very important movie that was made, and also a Catalan movie that is called Mediterranean, that told us about the reality about South America and about the refugees of the Mediterranean. But in literature, I would like to know who is writing now about what is passing now in Europe, for instance. And the next question, final question, is for Finn. What are we doing in the history teaching all around Europe just to tell the story of both sides? Let's say, not also about a history that could give the opportunity to the students to reach the information, to create their own opinion about what happened in the history of the last 100 years, for instance, just to understand what happened in the view of one side of the barricade and the other side of the barricade, because we know history is made by the winners of the political process, of the war process. Okay, thank you very much, and thank you.
Well, I don't think that I'm well prepared to answer the question of the literature, first of all, but I will answer the second one, I guess. Yeah, well, if I understood your question right, it was about whether one shall or how to teach history of the other side. I mean, it's generally what the Council of Europe tries to do is, or tries to encourage, because is that for example, the end of World War II, for example, you get the perspective of the French, of the Allied, and also of the occupation, also the perspective of the German side of on this end of the war and the partition of the Cold War. So it's actually contrasting, as you said, also different narratives. So you get to get the stories and the diversity of stories actually. In the history classroom, not only from different countries, but also from different groups in society, like to hear actually the voices of persecuted of the Nazi regime in the classrooms, next to learning about the functioning of the Nazi regime, for example. But it's general to diversify the narratives that you get in the classroom and not to have a single narrative. And there are many ways to achieve that, I believe. And we also do not go and tell the member states how is it best to do this, but we see and we observe how it is done in the classroom, and we start a dialogue with the civil society and with the organizations in this field to have an exchange on how to reflect on this, and if there's need, and how to improve on this. Yeah.
Well, every historian has her or his own national and cultural biases, some more, some less, but nobody is completely free from that. And that is why it is not enough to try and write history from the other point of view, but it's also important to listen to the narrative of the other side. You do not have to accept it, you can contest it, but you have to listen to it and you have to know it. That is the beginning for any kind of cross-border, cross-cultural historical understanding. And I'm more worried in general about the role of history in today's world, because at least in Finland, but what I know is that the situation is similar in many other countries, that the teaching of history has been reduced in schools, and it has become a voluntary subject in many cases. And the less people are aware of how and where and from what we have arrived from where we are today, the less unable they are to see into the future either. And they become easily captured by historical myths and those who abuse history for their own ends. So I think that we have a common interest in trying to strengthen the learning and understanding of history in all spaces. I believe today it's possible to graduate from universities, if you are not studying history, without being able to correctly answer the question, who were fighting in the First and Second World Wars against each other?
One last question.
It's maybe not questions, it's like reflection that I think a lot that we need these two sides, both, a lot of opinions. But now I'm staying in Ukraine. Last year, I'm not Ukrainian refugees, but I'm traveling a lot in Europe. And when I come to European Historical Museum, also like museum in Berlin, Museum of Capitulation, I see only these two boats, yes, two sides. And these two sides, it's German Nazi, and this is Russia, like victory. And I not see in this museum history of Ukrainian experience of Second World and other country. And I think this algorithm of two sides, of both sides, not work now. And I'm also thinking about this good Russia, where is this good Russia and good Russia historical, and where is the result of work of this good Russia historical also for Ukraine, for Syria, and for other country which was under attack last year. And I also understand that it's not work. And for me, is the questions, what work for teaching, for museum workers, and for people who inside of war. Because for me, like young generation, it's concept destroying when war come to Ukraine. And is the questions for all, we are all professional, we all work with memory, and I think now is the end of this conception. Thank you.
Thank you very much. And with this last statement, perhaps I would like to give the two ladies the opportunity to speak a second time also. And also the last question still resonates in my mind, the question of who is writing the literature that our children will read about today's situation. And I think some examples were mentioned in the Ukrainian first example. So who wants to go first, Luisa? And then
yes, I would like
Bogdana.
to answer about, to the question about the impact. Lo voy a hacer en castellano. El impacto.
Spanish.
The
impact we're searching with these two projects, Migrate and Remembrance Child, is knowledge in order to approach humanitarian practice to a wider audience, to disseminate this humanitarian aid in its most noble and pure version, the way it was practiced at different times in our recent history. And I'm thinking about during First World War, Spanish Civil War, and Second World War, practiced by volunteers and women, men and women, from solidarity, kindness, based on their beliefs, religious beliefs, and pacifist beliefs. Therefore, the impact we're searching is to communicate the idea of humanitarian aid and humanitarianism based on the principle of helping people to alleviate their suffering and to provide the most dignified human conditions, or maybe to preserve his or her life, and especially in the case of children, to help and alleviate victims of war through examples, facts, and veracities.
Sorry, I had another answer, because during the last intervention, someone was talking about God Russia. Efectivamente, tenemos distintas.
We do have. Yes, we do have different visions based on the past, what we've lived in Eastern Europe, and the experiences we have had in the rest of Europe. For many children of the war, victims of the Spanish Civil War that were evacuated to the Soviet Union between 1937 and 1938, the Soviet Union was their second homeland. The Soviet Union was good for them, a country that welcomed them, took care of them, educated them far away from their home country and their families.
Thank you, Luisa. Sorry.
I will probably just explain what all
it's
how
not only Russia, Soviet Union is
only
very
not
big.
about Soviet Union.
Yeah.
Sorry,
Yeah.
sorry. Thank you.
Yeah, that's
Okay,
why I wanted to explain also.
I would like to give the last word of the panelists to Dana. You had the first and the last.
Yeah, a lot of thoughts, I should say, while listening to all what was said. First of all, when we are talking about literature, to read about what is happening now in Europe, we need to translate more. And not from the larger languages like English, Spanish, or Russian, but from the small languages. From the small countries that are in the situations that we don't know the real story from the inside. And I'm not speaking about Ukrainians now. I'm speaking about the singing revolution in Lithuania. We don't know what was, like, how was it to be there at that time, what they felt. I only knew that after I went to Lithuania, to my friends, and they told me their story while we were doing the project with the translation and with the young writers. The second thing is, we shouldn't do the work to bring the terminology about this time that is happening now and using it already. That I mean about the Putin's Russian. Sorry, but it's not the term or the word or the part of word that we can use to be connected to the history that is happening now. If we need to be objective, as I understand from the mission of the historians through the borders, we should wait before we do determine what is happening, the word, what is happening now, and how we define the country which is doing the things that they are doing now. It's not only Putin. It's very important for Georgian people, it's very important for Ukrainian people that all the history that is told about what is happening now in our country is not used with an explanation about only one person who is responsible. It's thing that I cannot understand and will not agree from my perspective. About the impact, as I was saying, we are now focused of working with the translation, of working with knowing more about the countries that weren't in our focus before that, because we need to acknowledge that Ukraine, Georgia, Lithuania, Estonia, Finland were under influence of the Russian country for a long time, and we didn't communicate with each other as we should be. Just this little border, and also Belarus, little border between the Europe and the Russian. And we don't know the history of the countries that are at the same line. And this was the big, surprise for me that we are not communicating and we are not translating from the languages. This is our focus of our office now, and the impact that I got from the project that we did the last year, that we need to work more with the people who are on the same border with the aggression that is happening in our country now. Also, as I understood, when we are speaking together and we are looking for the smaller speaker, not for the bigger one, like in the meaning of the country, in the meaning of the culture, we can hear a very surprising point of view to the history. That was all I was talking about when she was talking about the perspective of the Second World War, because in Ukraine it's also the same. We didn't take part, we didn't fight in Second World if you are listening to the Russian historical books. There was only Russian heroics at the front line. There was only Russians in the front, and they were saving all the people in the world from what was happening. But it isn't true. There is a beautiful book of Ukrainian cinema director Alexander Dovzhenko, who fought in the war, during the war, and he wrote it. It's like a notebook, yes, of his all the stories from the war. And it was cut and published with without some pieces in the Soviet times, and only I think 2 or 3 years ago we got the whole book published. And this is the story that amazed me. He was explaining how awful it was for Ukraine, the Second World War, for our territory. We are not speaking about this even now. because when we are speaking in Europe about the Second World War, as Olha said, it's a perspective of the winner and the bigger one. Sorry.
Thank you very much. We were asked this morning what we can be proud of. Perhaps it's too strong a word, but what you are all doing especially gives me a sense of hope, a sense of that reconciliation and solidarity is there and that it can be created. Now we heard something that we also say at the end of our exhibition in the House of European History, that it is that because of the diversity of who we are in Europe and because of the diversity of our histories and the diversity of our memories that we have heard about, and the diversity of our narratives, be they made by big or small actors, we need translations. And Umberto Eco said translations are the language of Europe. So you all showed that this is possible and necessary, and I would add to that what we translate, what does it need? It needs listening, it needs listeners, it needs readers, it needs the receiving end as well. And that is what I hope for, and that is what we will also continue now to do during our 2 days here in Barcelona. So I would like to thank you all for your listening and speaking exercise and for your patience. And now I won't stand in the way of your lunch anymore. Thank you for your patience.